Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy right here. This is the Skiff Made Blades Drifter. First off, though, before I go any further, I want to thank my Patreon patrons who make it possible for me to pick up something like this just for review, right? Like, I don't know, maybe I should check these out, right? Because that's a wonderful thing. They make this channel possible, and they made this review possible, and they are absolute gems, every last one of them. Next thing, let's do some size comparison. This is not actually a particularly large knife. Here it is against your Spyderco Delica. Here it is against your Ontario Rat number 2, and so what we see here is not particularly giant. Here it is against the Spyderco PM2, which is our other token size comparison knife, and we see in terms of sharpened blade length, they are almost pretty much identical. They're not far off, at the very least. So there is that. And the next thing, I want to first address one thing real quick. Before you go any further, I want you to know that this is an $825 artisanal production pocket knife. There are going to be many people who are immediately, oh my God, I could never pay that. Yeah, that's fine. This video isn't necessarily for you. You're welcome to it, right? It could be fun to learn more about it, but at the same time, I get it, right? This is going to be, this is an upper echelon sort of thing within the collecting world. I'm a little crazy, but that's okay. Lots of folks are. The other thing is a lot of people are going to be like, Nick, didn't you do a video on this? I did. I have a video up that already called Seen the Extra Mile, talking about this guy in detail. Right? But the thing is, that was a video that was just me exploring the details that make this guy really impressive. And in fact, I'm going to refer you to that video as a part of this review, right? That's kind of covering the grade, if that makes sense. But I also figured it's worth talking about the thing in terms of, well, a more objective sense. A differently subjective sense. And telling you a little bit more about what's actually going on with this guy for everyday carry, and giving you my final opinion on it. So I figured I'd do that. And so let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting knife. Good side. This is a little thing, but it's kind of a thing that matters to me. This is a company, Skiff Made Blades, who not only did people generally say nice things about, but they were very honorable in dealing with me in that they didn't give me particularly special treatment. What I mean by that is I contacted them at some point in time when their books are open. I said, hey, I'd like a spot. They said, okay, great, sure, we'll put you on the list. It'll be, I forget the time they gave me, but it was, I think, on the order maybe a year, something like that, 8 months to a year or something like that. And then I heard from them around that time period, right? That's when they made my knife. And I can see it being very tempting for a company to cut a reviewer in line, so to speak, to put them up at the front of the line so that they get a little bit more exposure and, you know, at the cost of some of their customers. And I like the fact that they were just like, yeah, get in line. Cool. We'd love to have you have one. And so I appreciate that very, very much. That's a show of honor, and it's a show of their dedication to their everyday customer, that they're not bending the rules for some jackass on YouTube, right? That's a great thing. Next thing, the ergos on this guy are actually quite nice, right? Because you've got this finger choil up the front here. And it just locks the knife into your hand quite well. And it's got this texture here, which is actually quite good at keeping this guy in the hand. It's not a very slippery knife, and it works. And with this little bit here acting as a thumb ramp, I'm a fan of it. Ergonomically, it works very well in the hand. Along with the very tall clip, actually is another factor that makes this guy very nice. I appreciate that very much. Next thing, it actually has a lot of the features that one might expect from a modern high-quality production sort of knife that are not always found in the custom world. So, for instance, you do have an over-travel stop in this. This big Captain America shield here is actually an over-travel stop, which prevents the lock bar from going out too far that direction and being unable to be bent back otherwise, right? It has a lock bar insert here, which prevents any lock stick and, you know, I imagine makes their life a little bit easier during installation. It's got a lot of the nice little details in there, which I appreciate very much, and a good, you know, action, everything like that. That's definitely a thing. And actually, speaking of that action, no wrist at all. This is a beautiful detent. And more importantly, it is a super smooth, glassy knife. This is one of those knives that's not like, oh my God, drop shotty, although it definitely is pretty drop shotty, but it is so amazingly smooth that it's just like glass on glass sliding. It's a beautiful action on this guy. Very, very nice. Great bearings, which makes sense because Skiff makes bearings and they're good, right? But this is just a very, very nice action on this guy. Next thing, this actually has a pretty unique style to it, right? You take a look at this guy and it's a little bit different than a lot of what else is out there. I can't think of anything else out there that's doing exactly what this guy is. The Skiff, that is, has a very solid style. And I appreciate that very much. All the various elements are kind of there and unique and interesting. They've got themselves, they're doing their own thing, which I appreciate. Then finally, the clip on this guy. This is a very long clip, right? This guy is If I put it up next to a more conventional pocket clip, we see here is in terms of clipped in length, this guy is a little bit longer. Right? But a lot of people are like, oh my God, that long clip, that's dumb. Why do you need that? For me, actually, I don't mind it. Partly because it gives you a little bit of extra security, right? The knife would have to slide that much further out of your pocket in order to not drop back in order to go back out again. So I appreciate that, but it's also ergonomically often a nice thing, especially when the clip itself is contoured in the way that it is here. This actually, you don't really feel this clip in your hand particularly. If I grip really hard, I guess I can feel that it is there. But having these really these really long clips actually makes the clip feel just like a part of the handle, rather than when you've got a very short clip, it can often feel like a protuberance on the handle. So I appreciate that very much. That's a nice thing. The long clip is very nice ergonomically as well as in the pocket. And so to me, all of that is the good here, is that it's got a very smooth action. The long clips are very nice. It's got a very unique style. It's got the features you might expect and want, actually, from production knives, which aren't always there, and more custom kind of stuff. And they're a very honorable company, at least in their dealings with me. On the great side, the details are amazing here. This knife, I think the best way I've found to describe it is it's kind of a machining poem. What I mean by that is that this is an object that is machined and finished. I don't want to say that this is all like, I mean, I'm sure it's CNC, but there's a lot of hand finishing evidence here. But this is a nice reminder that machining can be art, because you get all of these beautiful things going on here. You get reflective surfaces, you get beautiful anodization, you get all of these 1,000 little details here, adding up to make this guy something that is an object that shows real mastery. And I want to go ahead, rather than belaboring all this again, I want to point you to that video about seeing the extra mile, where I go deep into this, where I talk all about the various things that I've noticed here, ranging from, little chamfers, little bits of polish. It's really amazing. They have done such a good job at this knife that, you hold this guy and you're like, oh yeah, that's what a high-end knife could be. And that's a really beautiful thing. I'm being light on the good here because there is literally a 20-minute video on the good. Do not view this as damning my faith praise. You just don't need to go there again. I did that already. So go ahead, check out that video. But to me, the great thing here is the detail work, 1,000%. On the bad side, to start with, this little choil guy could use to be a little touch larger. We see there's a little tiny smile at the bottom of the blade here, which means that the blade angle changes very slightly because it hasn't gotten to the full thinness of the grind at that point. This is a little tiny detail. It's about 2 millimeters away, but I would like to see that addressed so that way you get one consistent angle throughout the entire blade here. I am nitpicking, but at $800, I'm nitpicking very hard, right? Next thing, it is a little bit on the heavier side relative to some of what's out there. If we look at the blade length here, we are looking at just about 3.25 inches, but the overall weight of this guy is a little bit high in that it is 4.6 ounces. That's not, oh my God, heavy, but at the same time, there's not a lot of, for instance, internal milling. There's not a lot of effort that's gone to here to make this guy lightweight in the pocket, right? This is definitely not doing that, and so it's a little bit on the heavier side. Next thing, the steel here is CPM 154, and that's a fine steel, and you know what? It's good to go. It's a solid steel that I definitely use for everyday carry, and I don't mind at all. It's particle steel. There's goodness here. But at the same time, it's not at the same level of performance as some of the higher-end stuff you're getting in other production knives out there in the world. This is definitely a steel that is very often found in the custom world, but maybe not as much in the high-end production world. And so as a result, this sort of ends up with a little bit of a feeling of, this is mostly a collector piece, so why bother with something harder? Why bother with something, crazier than that, right? And I don't necessarily know that I agree with that. If you go into this price point, you should probably go crazy in all the various ways. I also understand that there are differences in terms of finishing, polishing, etc., but I'd still rather see a higher-end steel on knives that are going to be this expensive. Even when they're showing this kind of detail, when they're showing this kind of handwork, I'd still like to see that up there. And actually, speaking of that, the next thing is obviously the price here. This is $825 or more. I don't know what they're charging nowadays because everything gets more expensive over time, but this is going to be a prohibitive price for all but the most crazy and dedicated of collectors, right? This is a knife that a lot of people are going to not really understand why you would pay that much for a pocket knife, and I don't need to hear that in the comments. I'm aware that people have this opinion. Anyways, I digress. This is just very, very expensive. You can see where the time went. You can see where the money went. I don't look at this and feel like, wow, Skiff ripped me off at any stage. No, this is an amazingly done piece, and you can see the love that was put into it. but it's pricey. It's really pricey. You can get many good knives for the price of one of these guys. And availability is also a thing, right? Just because, well, there aren't that many of them. And part of the reason why there aren't that many of them is because they're putting a lot of time into each one, right? If these were little, if these were G10 liner locks and they would hammer them out in the CNC grinder, that'd be a different thing. But no, this is entirely a different thing. I was on their books for a while before my number came up, and I don't even know when their books are going to open again. This review probably won't help that, but nonetheless, availability isn't great, and the prices are very high. Then finally, on the bad side, the thing I probably like least about this guy, pretty predictably, is the fact that this has one heck of a pocket pecker on the back of it. What I mean by that is this flipper tab is sticking way out of there, and if you're carrying anything else besides your knife in your pocket, this guy is going to be pecking on that all damn day long. This is a thing that doesn't bother a lot of people, but to me, having that big protuberance on the back of the knife is not something I'm a fan of, and I almost wish that they had gone ahead and sheared that off and just put a little bit more handle and a thumb stud here. I feel like that might have been a little bit nicer, but this thing is definitely, it's large to the point where it's like needlessly so. I am not a big fan of those huge flipper tabs, and this is definitely a huge flipper tab. It also, for what it's worth, becomes a trouble as you are cutting down onto a surface, because the flipper tab is going to contact the surface along with your fingers, but even if you're trying to do a very flat cut, holding it in a different grip, the flipper tab is going to hit and make sure that your blade can't touch most of the flat surface. So that's not something I'm particularly in love with. I definitely like the flipper tab the least of any part of this knife. It works great and the knife flips, but at the same time, oof. So to me at least, that's what's bad. I don't like the flipper tab here. The price is very, very high, although so is the quality. CPM 154 is not necessarily a steel I want to be seeing at super high ends. It's a bit on the heavier side relative to a lot of your production knives in this kind of range, and the choil could use to be a little tiny bit larger, so you'd get that consistent angle throughout. There's nothing ugly here, so let's go into the final conclusion. This is a nice knife. I mean, duh, right? It is. It's very, very, very good. The company and the people behind it seem to be pretty solid. They've got good ergos here. They've got good features, good style, a nice clip, a great action, and details that are worth a 20-minute video. That's not something you can say about a lot of knives, and this one, at least in my estimation, and this one is. So I respect the living in, frankly, the dead heck out of that, right? I respect it. But it's also got could use a larger choil. It's a little heavy. CPM 154 isn't the top of the pack, so to speak. It's very expensive. It's hard to get, and it's got one of the most pocket-peckingest flipper tabs out there right now. It's a little crazy. All of those things add up to me to be a little bit more of this knife feels like a collector knife more than a user knife. It's carryable. You can use it, absolutely 100%. But for me, it didn't end up finding its way into my pocket for a couple of reasons. I mean, the weight makes you feel it a little bit more. You'll strop it a little bit more often because CPM 154 doesn't have the wear resistance of some of the higher end stuff out there. You're probably going to be worried about the investment because you couldn't get another one there. The tab is attacking anything that comes near, and the style, honestly, for it is unique, but I can't say it's like, oh my God, it's my style, right? I like what Skiff is doing. I'm picking up what he's putting down, but at the same time, it's not anything that, it doesn't grab me personally, but that's personal. Ultimately, this is sort of a knife that underlined the difference between a knife that I really appreciate, a knife that I like a lot, and then the knife that I carry, right? This guy didn't end up getting a lot of pocket time. I made sure to carry it for the channel, for the purposes of review, but after I felt like I was done with that, I didn't feel the strong need to carry it more. It just didn't get much pocket time, and as a result, given that I'm a lucky man, but not so lucky that $800 is not anything at all, this guy probably is not going to stick around. I'll probably sell this guy to one of my Patreon patrons, and, that's going to be a thing, but I'm going to miss it, right? I'm going to continue talking about it. There are knives in my world where it's like, I'm going to sell this, and I'm going to forget about it, and it'll never occur. And then there are ones where it's going to be like, oh, yeah, that was really good. That was really, really good. And it's very possible, by the way, that Skiff could drop something else that will appeal to me in an even greater sense, right? Maybe shear off the damn pocket pecker and we'll talk, right? The Skiff is on my radar. And to be clear, even though I will probably be selling it, this is among the nicest knives that are being made right now in 2021. Skiff is a maker that, I respected before, but having handled this, having spent time looking at the details of it, makes that respect so much stronger, right? This is one of those pieces that reminds me that machining is certainly an industrial process, right? It's certainly a means of production, but it's also very much an art, and especially when you combine it with the kinds of hand finishing that's been done here. I mean, even just looking at the polish on this pivot collar here, when I polish it up, oh my God, you can see the I Am Nick Shabazz t-shirt here. Anyways, I digress. This is a really incredible piece of art, and folks like Skiff, as well as a bunch of other folks in the community, they're making these objects that are incredible, but also happen to be good knives. And so this is a gem, 100%. You have to know that you're buying art as much as you're buying a knife, but oh my God, is it compelling. And there is a reason that Skiff-made knives Skiff-made blades, I forget the exact name, but there's a reason why this is getting so much hype. It's good. It really, really is. And so my entreaties to you, so to speak, is if you're loving the machining, you love knife making as a form of art, as well as a form of tool making, and you've got the cash to spend and the actual ability to pick one of these guys up, then I can very easily see this little guy drifting into your collection. So there you go. Really well done, Skiff. You are on my radar. I'm taking a look at anything you do in the future here. And have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. And bye now.